Greetings everyone, one and all, welcome once more. As always, I am your most humble host, Jay. I return once more from the void between pages to again tell of the bizarre and the unknown. So sit and relax as I again share with you what I've been reading. Oh god, Jay's doing a Marvel book, everyone head for the hills! Okay, now that we got the jokes out of us, our first topic is the recent Beta Ray Bill miniseries from earlier this year, written and illustrated by Daniel Warren Johnson, with Mike Spicer doing the coloring, focusing on everyone's favorite alien demigod, the eponymous Beta Ray Bill. Bill is a character that more casual readers may know simply by appearance, but are more than likely to not know much about the character beyond that. In fact, it's a safe bet to assume that when you looked at the thumbnail, you said something like, "Oh hey, is that Horse Thor? Jay's talking about Horse Thor. He's so freaky looking. What's Horse Thor's deal? I can't wait to hear what Horse Thor is up to." No! Bad. You come into my house. You disrespect Bill like this. How dare you? I'm never inviting you to my sleepover ever again. Wait, what was I talking about? Alright. For those not familiar, Beta Ray Bill first appeared in 1983, debuting in Mighty Thor number 337, created by artist and writer Walter Simonson on the first issue of his run. Hailing from the distant world Corbin, Bill's home planet was destroyed when an army of mysterious monsters set off a massive blast of energy, destroying much of his galaxy in the process. As the survivors prepared to flee, Bill was chosen to be the Corbinites' Grand Protector, being torn apart and reconstructed from the ground up into a powerful cyborg warrior, working tirelessly to protect his people as they fled to a new home and fight back the monsters who sought to finish the job, eventually revealed to be an army of demons controlled by the maniacal Surtur. Due to a series of unfortunate coincidences, Bill ran afoul of Thor, leading to a lengthy battle between the two. However, much to the surprise of Thor, not only was Bill totally able to kick his ass, but was found to be deemed worthy to wield Mjolnir, usurping Thor's power from him in the process. This series of shenanigans eventually resolved itself, leading to Thor and Bill becoming fast friends, and Bill obtaining his own hammer, Stormbreaker, in the process. Bill would become a recurring ally of Thor's from here, maintaining a fairly strong presence but never quite escaping from Thor's shadow. Fittingly enough, this serves as a major theme for this story. Picking up after the last big dumb crossover event, King in Black, where a whole bunch of stuff happened that I didn't bother to look at to summarize it because it was really fucking boring. But during the events of that story, Thor and Bill had a minor disagreement, let's say, which culminated in Thor shattering Stormbreaker in the process. Now stuck with the worst of both worlds, no longer wielding the mighty forces he once had, and trapped in his horrifying true form, Bill has finally reached his wit's end with life. After suffering humiliation after humiliation due to this, capped off with Thor once again stealing his thunder, Bill finally snaps on his longtime friend and abandons Asgard in rage. Bill, accompanied by Pip the Troll and the temporarily revived Scourge the Executioner, sets off on a journey across the galaxy on a quest to reclaim his mighty powers once more. The central overarching theme of the story is about appearances, how the perceptions of the self and of others can influence who you are as a person, and how people work to change and overcome them. Bill's rather ghastly visage and how people view him as a monster have always been a central part of his character since creation, but here it's brought to the forefront. His jealousy and self-loathing serves to color his perceptions of everything, leading to willingly forsaking and neglecting those around him, and believing their reassurances to be hollow, itself further fueling his self-loathing. It's a surprisingly relatable feeling, and one that's particularly common, and it's handled well. Johnson does a good job at selling Bill's strife and making it feel genuine, that he's been letting all of this build up and up and up inside of him, and now that he's lost one of the few positive elements he once had, it's finally collapsed around him and buried him in his own sorrow. And I do like that they don't make it solely about his appearance, incorporating his past defeats and failures to live up to the destiny his people laid out for him, and adding it to the pile of suffering for him to sort through. It's very layered, although I wouldn't exactly call it complex. Not to say that it's shallow by any means, it has substance to it, there's just not much in the way of nuance and everything is more or less spelled out for the reader. Bill's companions don't add all that much to the themes or the narrative, aside from his ship Scuttlebutt and its AI. Scourge is mostly here for comedic relief. His entire motive for being here is that he got bored of the eternal paradise of Valhalla because it doesn't have any guns in it, and openly referring to himself as Bill's wingman in this quest to regain his power. And he's fine here. I think his loud, brash, and smug, self-assured demeanor work as a good contrast to Bill. But his contributions mostly involve the ripping and or tearing of people who are trying to kill them, usually involving some manner of giant gun in the process. But I do enjoy his friendship with Bill, and it's well represented here. Scourge comes off as that one friend who really genuinely sympathizes with you and wants to help you through your problems, but is just utterly clueless about what's going on with you and has very little understanding about how to help. Pip, on the other hand, doesn't really contribute anything at all. He really only tags along because he felt like it, and has no real influence on the events that occur. He has very few lines of dialogue, and nothing he says or does contribute in any significant way that any other character couldn't have done. Johnson tries to give Pip a connection with Bill's strife by having him sympathize with his feelings and doubts and feeling a sense of kinship from it, but this is brought up in a single line and doesn't get brought up again, nor does it tie into anything later on. But his relationship with his ship Scott is a big focus, and I really like how it's handled. As Bill's oldest, and arguably only friend, Scott has the best understanding of his problems, but being a soulless AI, it doesn't really have the best ability to help Bill realize his problems. However, when the strange energies of the godly realms causes Scott's programming to evolve, she takes on a physical form and becomes far more human than even she seems to realize. I like how the mental journey is shown, now suddenly becoming aware of emotions and feelings, and finally being able to process her friendship with Bill and how she cares for him and his plight. She's able to counterbalance Bill's pessimism by reminding him of his past and his many triumphs, trying to teach him to not let his failures and sorrow define his actions. This is best highlighted in issue 4, as a mysterious demon puts Bill and Scott into an illusion, forcing the duo on a trip throughout Bill's memories in an attempt to break the two, and it's Scott's influence that manages to push them through by helping remind Bill of kinder, happier moments, and it's a spectacular sequence. It's handled in a very mature way, although not exactly super realistic all things considered, and I do appreciate that it subverts the expected cliche of friendship solves all your problems by having Bill still be dead set on his goal that he's ultimately dismissive of Scott's advice. It's a good angle to go with, and I like the new perspective on characters and their relationships with each other, and I'm glad it doesn't go too far into robo-fucker territory. It gets close, it really does get close, but I'm glad it didn't go all in on it since I feel that it would have lessened the impact of Bill's arc and would have made it feel very tacky, not to mention making his rejection of her advice feel really weird in the process. Much of the actual journey occurs off-screen, which is somewhat of a disappointment. This leads to a somewhat repetitive sequence of events for the story, as Bill and the gang will have absolutely no issues getting to where they need to go, only to spontaneously end up in a fight when they get there. Bill's initial goal is to go find Odin so he can bully him into making a new Stormbreaker, and he finds Odin and gets there with no issues until a bar fight suddenly forms because Bill is just that hideous. Then, when Odin proves to be worthless, they go and make their way to Muspelheim to steal Surtur's sword, and which goes amazingly well and they have no problems at all until they're past the gate and actually flying around there. This in itself is not exactly a problem, as it leaves more space for character scenes and gives Johnson a lot of time to really flesh out the thoughts and feelings of the cast. But at the same time, I would have liked to see the journey spread out more, as it would have allowed for multiple locales and different opportunities for dilemmas that the cast could deal with, as well as making the journey itself feel more rewarding when they finally make it to the Twilight Sword. The action scenes are very well rendered. They're all massive scale battles with dozens of combatants all at once, and Johnson packs a lot of energy into the action and has a very good flow for the motion of combat. It's very flashy, yet still packing a lot of substance into it. This is best exemplified in the final issue, with Bill's climactic duel with Surtur over the possession of the Twilight Sword, a frenzied and chaotic brawl as the two lifelong enemies duke it out all across Muspelheim. You really feel the energy and weight behind the blows, the sheer force of rage and hate powering the two's blows. There's not much in the way of flashy stunts or superpowers. It's a rough, brutal slugfest stretched out across the whole issue. It really culminates nicely in the ending of the story, and I'll throw up a timecode here for you to skip it if you want to read it for yourself. After Pip gets bodied by Surtur, Bill puts him through a conga line of humiliation, pile-driving his ass straight into a spire and impaling him, before getting him set up to get blasted by a gigantic cannon from his ship, which buys him enough time to claim Twilight and he goes all rules of nature on Surtur's ass and killing him. It's a good ending, Bill getting his powers again and finally getting vengeance against Surtur for what he did to his people. But what pushes it past being good and makes it a truly great ending is the big subversion of the expected ending. Bill gets what he wanted and regains his outer beauty, but it's a hollow gesture. The insecurities and self-loathing he feels are buried far deeper than he realized, and gaining his physical appearance back did nothing to solve the problems he truly faces. It's a powerful message, and one that I'm glad that Johnson wins for, as otherwise the whole moral message of the story would have ended up collapsing on itself. It's a relatable message too. teaching the reader that your problems and insecurities can be magically solved by an outward cosmetic change, that they run deeper than that and require more effort to really solve, which I believe is a good message. Overall, the mini is a fantastic piece for fans of Beta Ray Bill, and I would solidly recommend it. The art is an absolute standout in this book too. Johnson is able to pack a whole boatload of detail into the panels while still remaining fairly simplistic with the designs. With light and erratic line work and very heavy spatterings of black and erratic strokes filling large swaths of the page, yet leaving gaps for the color to bleed through. It gives the book a very grimy and gritty tone to it that makes it feel very unique. And Mike Spicer's coloring enhances it as well, with a very diverse palette of saturated colors that blend different tones together, making everything stand out from one another. It gives it all the feel of a heavy metal album cover come to life, and I would absolutely love to see more of it. However, newer fans, or those not familiar with Bill as a character, likely won't get much out of it. Although the book recaps his origin and goes over the basic information you need to know about Bill, it still assumes familiarity with the character and his motives in order to enjoy the series. If you're looking to find out more about him, this isn't the place to go, but if you have some knowledge, then you'll find something to enjoy. But that, of course, isn't quite the end this time, as up next we talk about another recent series, Vinyl. Vinyl, written by Doug Wagner, with art by Daniel Hilliard and colors by Dave Stewart, was created by 12 Gauge Comics and published by Image, running from June to November of this year. Meet Walter. Walter's your average, ordinary old man. He likes listening to music, engaging in his hobbies with those who share it, and going on trips to the park with his best friend Dennis. Oh right, he's also a serial killer. When Walter's pal Dennis, who just so happens to be an FBI agent running the case to apprehend Walter, gets kidnapped by a group of criminals who want revenge for actions he made against them in the past, Walter teams up with Dennis's partner against her will and brings together a team to track down Dennis and rescue him before it's too late. I enjoy me some slasher movies. I think they can be really great showcases of the powers of practical special effects, and even though they tend to be formulaic, they're always enjoyable to sit down and watch, be it alone or for ironic viewing with friends. But the slasher genre is one that never really works outside of movies. You lose something when you take away the controlled linear narrative and/or the ability to weaponize the sound design when you adapt it into other mediums. But for the most part, Vinyl makes it work, although not being a straight-on slasher, it helps to a degree. Walter is an enjoyable protagonist. He feels very genuine, and if it weren't for the whole casually murders people thing, he'd be someone that could be a great friend. Well, maybe that might dissuade some of you, but to me that just makes him like all my other friends. We don't have any real insight into his methods or motivations, which to a degree is fine. Over-explaining your killers is usually the death sign of a slasher story, but I think it would have helped to flesh out the setting a bit more to get any real clue of why he does what he does. We get the implication that he does it for the art of it, treating murder as if it were a canvas of sort. However, the full picture is kept vague. But I do like that they didn't try to give Walter the cliché, ultra-wacky serial killer quirk that I see people always do when they make serial killer characters. Walter has a thing for music and listens to it near constantly, and has a real great affinity for recognizing musicians and their song names. And other than nicking a record or two when he kills someone, that's about the most we get for his quirks. His personal interest in music also has a greater relevance to him beyond just a part of his hobby. And without spoiling it for you, it feels less like a cheap gimmick to make him seem unique or scary, and is just a natural inclusion to his character. And I do think it's a nice twist that Walter is just genuinely trying to save Dennis out of the kindness of his heart, that he does actually consider him a friend, and he has no ulterior motives about it. I like that angle for it, it's different. We don't get much info about the other killers, or how Walter knows them. We're given just enough to infer what their personalities and methodologies are, but otherwise they're just generally blank slates. There seems to be a trend going with them trying to represent the different eras of slasher films, with the twins being younger horror geeks, possibly as a comparison to the more modern, self-referential and ironic slashers, and Guy being fairly blunt and talking about how he's gotten tired of the game, perhaps as a mirror of the super old-school slashers which were less refined and more straightforward. But it's not really connected all around, so it's more speculation at this point. Same for the cult that serves as our antagonists. They're a pretty typical backwoods religious cult that talks about love and ascension and all that crap, speaking in very empty, poetic platitudes and using flowers as a symbolic element. We don't really get any clue of what their deal is. We're at least given proper context for why they want to kidnap and kill Dennis, but beyond that it's vague about their motives. I initially thought that they were meant to be a parody of the movie Midsummer and the cult from that, but I don't think it was intentional beyond sharing thematic elements. but they both come together and add to the world the story conveys, although I wish we got to dive just a bit deeper into it. Walter keeps bringing up how he finds the cult unnatural and how they inherently don't belong, but it isn't explored much. It would have been neat to make it an angle about slasher movies versus artsy horror, personally. The action is very good and conveys a lot of weight and motion with it. It emphasizes using quick cuts between panel to panel to show a quick, brutal flow of action and favors close-up shots to get to the point of the action. It emulates the same style older slashers used, where they'd favor quick cuts and focusing on specific injuries in order to deal with censorship, while also putting more emphasis on the kill. However, it doesn't quite work the same in a comic as it does in a movie, since in a comic it's entirely up to the reader to interpret the speed of actions, and the jumps between panel to panel make it hard to really discern what's meant to be happening. It works at some points, and does a good job showing off the primal violence that slashers are built for, but when it doesn't work, it feels like someone removed shots and stitched together segments together haphazardly. The violence is intense, cartoonish at points even. Someone gets stabbed once and all of their organs explode out of their body in a geyser of bright, shiny red blood, so potent you'd think that there were 3 guys overlapping each other. In fact, I went back through it while writing this, and I'm pretty sure that at least one panel on every single page has blood somewhere on it. Now, understandably, I don't know how much of it I can show, but I do really like it. There's at least some attention to anatomy, and while everyone seems to be made of plasticine with how easy it is to get shredded to bits, that's at least accurate to the slasher experience, and really I wouldn't want it any other way. The blood, ironically, obscures the gore to some degree, both enhancing the violence and masking the more graphic elements, which was a good choice artistically. On that topic, the art is very good. Hilliard's designs and pencil work are fabulous, going for a very cartoony style with lots of simplistic use of hatching to emphasize detail with minimal work. Characters are very expressive and everybody manages to stand out despite sharing the same general face and eye structure. It reminds me a lot of Ryan Ottley's art at points, although it's a bit less detailed. There's also a very minimal amount of inking done. Shading is fairly light, and every character has thick black outlines around them that make them pop out, but is otherwise reserved for use of full black for heavy darkness, which is effectively utilized by having characters slowly bleed from the shadows for a sudden shock reveal. Dave Stewart has a really good eye for colors and lighting as well, showing a good attention to detail for light sources and how shadows should cast, and the light shadowing makes it feel more natural. He sticks to a fairly neutral color palette, shades that are not too bright but not too dark, making everything seem grim and conveying a general uneasiness without being bland or muddy. This also helps the blood, a very highly saturated red as mentioned before, stand out much more and really accentuate the gore in a way you can't really get from a film. Final tells a pretty concise story, and doesn't overstay its welcome. It really does feel like they took a movie and compressed it into a comic book, and for the most part does a good job at representing itself. I wouldn't exactly say it's scary, but has scary visuals and has a good spooky atmosphere for it. It builds suspense and creates a world that's got many layers and is engaging, but doesn't explore it enough to make it worthwhile. Leaving some elements vague helps build suspense more, but in some cases it's better to tell rather than show. If you're a fan of horror, and slashers in general, then give it a read, it's right up your alley. If you're someone who's squeamish about blood and gore, or doesn't like a lot of violence, then it's not going to be something you enjoy, but that's kind of a given considering what genre it is. For me, it's right up my alley, and I'm a bit sad I didn't find out about it until it was right at the end. I can't wait for a collected edition though, gonna make sure to jump on that right away. And on that note, I believe that's all for this time. This has been Jay, and as I return to the void between pages, I look forward to when next we may meet, and I can share what else I've been reading.